Goliad, Texas is located on the San Antonio River in Goliad County about 100 miles southeast of San Antonio. The Goliad County Courthouse and the so-called Hanging Tree hold a commanding presence in the town square. This was the site for court sessions at various times from 1846 to 1870. Death sentences called for by the courts were carried out immediately from a limb on this hanging tree. Hangings are no longer held there, but now numerous shops and eateries create a strong cultural flavor, even holding such events as classic car shows. Large oak trees literally rise from the middle of streets. Goliad is a historic town that played a big role in the Texas War for Independence. A monument commemorates the Goliad Massacre of 1836. Goliad was established in 1749 when Spanish colonizer José de Escandón recommended moving missions Nuestra Señora del Espíritu Santo de Zúñiga and its royal protector, Nuestra Señora del Loreto de la Bahía del Espíritu Santo Presidio, more commonly known as Presidio La Bahía, from its location on the Guadalupe River to its current site on the San Antonio River. Today you can still see the old Presidio as you drive into town. Across the river, the Spanish built the mission out of gray limestone. The mission church was built to Christianize Indians and make them citizens of Spain. Some pieces in the mission museum give some idea of the Indians who lived there. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in Texas, they had metal armor, lances, swords, guns, and cannons. They were met by native groups who had their own weapons such as bows, spears, and atlatl. While the conquistadors' metal armor was effective in protecting against attacks from European swords, projectile points like the replicas below were capable of piercing the metal armor worn by the Spanish. One conquistador claimed that an atlatl dart could pass through any sort of armor. This native weaponry was made with stone, wood, bone, or antler. The stone projectile points used by native people were attached to wooden shafts or handles using asphaltum, a natural tar-like substance that washes ashore from oil seepages beneath the Gulf of Mexico. The asphaltum is used as an adhesive for projectile points as well as feathers on an arrow. Gourds were grown in the area and were important for use as water jugs, ladles, and storage. Mesquite beans and pecans were food used by the local natives. Here for more than 70 years, the Franciscan missionaries taught the native Aranama peoples the religious principles and become good Spanish citizens on the remote northern frontier. The immense herds of cattle that supported the mission population became the foundation for the ranching industry of modern Texas. At its peak of success, this mission possessed huge herds of cattle and supplied settlements in Mexico as well as missions in present-day Texas. In 1758, about 180 people resided at the mission and fort. All about were Indian jacales, which were brush huts thatched with grass and plastered with clay. Spacious grazing lands and fertile fields surrounded the area where Spanish colonists had formed a community. The mission workshop played an important role in the effort to make the economy of the mission self-sustaining. Activities included carpentry, pottery making, tallow making, and weaving. Aranama-style pottery and Spanish colonial spinning and weaving implements are reproduced here to portray the pottery making and weaving crafts of the 18th century. The Aranama had no weaving tradition, so the missionaries selected an Indian who was trained as a weaver. Assisted by several boys, he worked a Spanish-style frame loom. Espiritu Santos' weavers concentrated on simple, durable fabrics, blankets, mantas, which is coarse cotton cloth, and sayal, which is coarse wool cloth, rather than finer textiles that weren't as useful. Both cotton and wool cloth were woven at Mission Espiritu Santo, but wool was the only fiber produced locally. Raw cotton came from the San Antonio missions. Spinning and weaving require all sorts of tools. After shearing, the wool was washed to remove foreign matter caught in the fleece. Carding and combing prepared the fiber for spinning. Using both spinning wheel and spindles and whorls, the women and girls spun the fiber into yarn suitable for weaving. Putting the yarn on a winding frame, though not essential, made it easier to handle. Since dye stuffs were expensive, much of the yarn was left its natural color. Cochineal and indigo were purchased for decorative dyeing. The Indian women of the mission were always making pots, pans, and other clay wares. They traded them with the Spanish women of the Presidio La Bahia. The Indians needed pottery for ordinary household tasks, such as cooking, serving, storing, and carrying. Clay is present in most locales but varies greatly in composition, and that requires different ways of preparing it. The potters at Espiritu Santo added crushed bone. The potter rolled the prepared clay into coils, which were then stacked a layer at a time, all the while smoothing and shaping into the desired form. The Aranama Indians used an uncommon technique for attaching handles. For each handle they made 2 holes in the side of the vessel, inserted the ends of a short coil of clay, and flattened the ends to form a smooth joint. The Aranama potters probably fired their vessels by a technique common among American Indians. They simply left the sun-dried pots in the open and surrounded them with a wood or dung fire. Most of the pots were plain, but some were decorated with crude red or black designs painted with ochre or asphaltum. A fire is made on the forge to heat the metals to a point where they can be shaped into useful items. Blacksmiths used an anvil to hammer metal into shape. The grindstone is used to sharpen knives, tools, and weapons.